hello you, welcome to Geekism and welcome back to Pinewood Hills. It is 2018, well it is in the rest of the world, but here it is 1965. That's right, we're moving on into stage 2 of the build, which is going to be set in the mid-60s. So for those of you who don't really know what we're doing here, we're building a budget-conscious British park that each phase of the build is going to be wrapped around an era of when it was originally built, but done in a modern style. So the point I mean there is that all the buildings and the rides are set from the original time they were built, but some of the buildings may have been repurposed and things like that. So for instance, in the original area there, the 40s, we've got a few wooden coasters and some simple flats like carousel, but one of the buildings now has an arcade in it that will have been added in the 80s at some point. So the original sort of plan, the original sort of footprint is based around a certain era and the rides that are there, but you know, some modern twists might have happened through the years. So we're looking at it from 2017, but the build is originally set in the 60s. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out because a few people seem to be kind of struggling with some of the design choices I'm making, so I just wanted to explain as to what that was. I have to apologise first of all in the fact that for some reason some of the footage here has been corrupted, so we haven't actually got footage of the main build this week, which is the first of a series of Googie buildings, which I'll go into in a moment. So unfortunately the footage you're looking at here is kind of everything up to it and a little bit after it, but we'll do a short real-time clip in a moment where we can have a look at it properly, okay? So instead of talking about what I'm building on screen, it's all pretty simple, it's mostly pathwork, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the theme and the idea behind this area. So it's going to be themed around a style of architecture called Googie, which originally comes from, I believe, a restaurant that used this style originally. But the best way to describe it is Americana, late deco, a little bit of sort of neo-futurism in there, so think a little bit like Fallout, I guess. Think a little bit about the Las Vegas sign, Route 66, all that kind of thing. Those sort of really sharp angles, relatively bright pastel colours, and lots of other little twists like that, lots of sheet metal, lots of flat spaces and things like that. A few reasons why I wanted to do that style of architecture. One, I don't think I've seen anyone really tackle it in the game yet already, and there are some pieces in the game that really lend themselves well to it. A lot of the signage in the game is very, very sort of Googie style. Also, I wanted something that was very sort of iconic of the 60s, and even though this is a British park, and obviously we're basing it around British ideology and British sort of sensibilities, the America, was huge in the UK in the 60s. The Beatles went over there and basically brought everything back with them. So Americana was a big deal in the UK in the 60s. Everyone, James Dean was a little bit earlier than that really, but just sort of cowboys and westerns and big cars and everything. It was a big part of UK culture, was the sort of replication of American culture, and that's something I wanted to do in this area. It's quite a small area. It's not going to have any coasters. It's actually going to have a couple of flat rides, the Ferris wheel that you see there, and there may be a few other sort of traditional pier style rides, thinking probably something like Dodgems, and maybe the Monteleone that came in the most recent update, I think. It's going to be a relatively smaller area as well, much smaller than the 40s area, probably looking at about 4 or 5 episodes in this area before we move into the 70s, when we can obviously start doing steel coasters, and that's one thing that a lot of people have been waiting for. So this is going to be sort of like a mini area really, and it's all going to be based around this lake that's been placed here. Very early plan of the lake this is, by the way. Most likely will change in the future, depending on size, shape, where it ends up going. The other thing I did place in the lake here is one of the new jungle transport rides, the boat rides, I forget what they're called, Lake Adventure or something like that, Water Adventure, I forget. And that's actually going to act as a transport ride. I know they work without being transport rides now, but I wanted to be a transport ride from this area here across to a much later development in the park. So it actually would have been added much, much later, but obviously I need the pier in place for it now. So you'll see me actually place that down. At the moment it just does a little loop around the lake, but it's purely there so that I make sure I leave room for it, to be honest with you. So here I'm starting work on a gate, an archway into the area from the main pathway. This is very influenced by Southgate Shopping Centre, which is a shopping centre in the UK that has a very sort of Googie style architecture. So, like I say, even though this is very Americana, it's very based in America, there are a lot of places in the UK that use this style of architecture from the 60s. There's also, a lot of this seen in theme parks as well. Blackpool Pleasure Beach, for instance, has got tons of Googie architecture. I'll put, if I can remember and find some, I'll put a few reference pictures in the description of the sort of things I'm talking about. Here I'm using the old billboard trick to get some decent fonts here to use in the area. The area is called Sparrow Wharf, at least for now. I'm tempted to change it as I'm not 100% sure it fits with the theme of the architecture, but I wanted to try to kind of design this, and this is going to be a real subtle thing, this, as to whether or not it even comes across, I don't know. I wanted to kind of design this area like British people trying to replicate the States. Okay, so even though it's all very much based on an American style of architecture, I still want some sort of British sensibilities to seep through, almost by accident. It's not necessarily that they wanted this to happen, it's just they couldn't help it because they are British themselves, and probably I can't help it because I'm British myself. So one thing I was very aware of is that I want the pier area, as in the actual sort of wooden walkway or stone walkway that people walk across, and the fencing that surrounds it, to be a little bit more traditionally British. Lots of sort of wrought iron and stone and things like that. Think a little bit more like Blackpool piers. Okay, so this whole area is going to be very influenced by Blackpool Pleasure Beach and the surrounding areas, the piers, the North Pier, the South Pier, and the Central Pier, I guess, all three of them, I suppose, and the area around the tower as well. Very much wanted to encapsulate the 60s seaside resort. There was a huge thing in the UK before sort of airline travel into Europe became cheap. Everyone went to Blackpool. If you lived in the north, or if you lived in the south, you'd go to places like Margate or similar, all different places. Weston-super-Mare in the Midlands, lots of different places you can go and get sort of fish and chips on the beach, candy floss or cotton candy, if you don't know what I'm talking about, and all different things like that. And they would of course come with rides as well. Now unfortunately we can't do a traditional seaside in the game at the moment without having a weird sort of lake with edges. It'd be great to be able to see custom maps eventually, but for now we can't. So I wanted to kind of replicate that feeling on the edge of a lake, and hopefully that's kind of what we're going to be doing over the next few episodes. It's going to be very sort of 60s end of the pier, with this sort of pseudo-American architecture, and I actually think so far it's turned out pretty well. And they always say that change is as good as a rest. Excuse me. And I've kind of had both with Pinewood Hills. I had a couple of weeks off from it for Christmas. One thing I did promise the wife was that I wouldn't be sat at a computer all through the Christmas break. So that's why a lot of the content on the channel has been sort of shorter form, let's plays and stuff like that. Stuff I can kind of make easier, really. If I'm honest with you, I could just churn them out a bit quicker. Obviously, this Pinewood video here you're watching is probably about 8-9 hours work, I guess. Really, it wouldn't normally be that long, but because I'm trying new things here and tackling different ideas, it took a little bit longer. There was a lot of footage here that isn't shown that I sort of chopped away and had another go at. One of the Googie style things is all these cool circles, and again the colour schemes are often sort of what I would call bright pastels, I guess, so sort of oranges, reds, blues, greens, but not really vibrant neon, just slightly more subdued than that. And also they have a lot of this sort of steel angular shapes that you'll see a lot of, that I'm going to try and use as much as I can throughout the build without it being a little bit sort of too over the top. So there you go, there's the sign, Sparrow Wharf, very over the top, very ostentatious. Where I place it probably isn't where it's going to stay. I just needed to kind of stick it somewhere really for the video and for the thumbnail and things like that. It'll probably end up going a little bit further back actually and being mounted on some sort of stone structure, and the pathing itself may actually end up changing there because it's such a large archway. It almost needs to be treated a bit more like a weenie, so you can actually walk up to it. At the moment the path sort of walks alongside it, and a lot of it would get lost if you were actually walking there. Next up, I wanted to do a sign on the Ferris wheel. Again, very sort of common thing you would see. If I'm completely honest, I'm not really happy with how this turns out, and we'll probably at a later stage go back and have another go at it. The main problem is that the Pinewood Hills logo that we've currently got doesn't really lend itself to working in a shape other than a straight line. So it may well be that we have a redesign of the logo for the 60s. Again, this isn't something unheard of. You know, places change their logo lots and lots, and then oftentimes they won't replace the older versions of it. So you'll have old versions of the logo around the place. So I may end up going back and doing something a bit more like an Art Deco style sort of logo there. So you can see us placing in the river ride here. Don't really do much with this, unfortunately, at the moment. Literally just sort of get the queue in to kind of figure out how this space is going to work. I want this to be all one continuous pier with a roped off queue, as opposed to you being able to see the queue over the water there. So it's tricky to do. You know, we know that the pathing and the terrain have issues. Unfortunately, I'm not able to get past those issues here, so we do have some funky little sort of design quibbles that we have to work around. Mostly the curbing on raised path. It's something that we just kind of have to deal with, unfortunately. So you see here we've got a weird little blob of water underneath what will become our first building in a moment. Fortunately, in a moment there's going to be a huge jump, because for some reason, like I say, the footage just didn't want to play. So you'll see we go from a jungle cruise to having a little zoom out and looking around. I think we're just trying to figure out how many boats we can get on there, so they just keep looping at the moment, just so it looks okay. And boom, there we go, we've got a building. So sorry about that. The gas pumps, you can see there what we built in the live stream on Tuesday as a kind of like teaser as to the sort of style that we were going to be building in. And these cars, I have not built these are by the fantastic Wings and Strings. You'll know him, he's done loads of stuff for RollerCoaster. Really is very good at lots of different things, but most of his stuff is based around infrastructure and vehicles. He does the most amazing cars. I asked him to do some British cars. He said he'd look into it. I couldn't wait, so I've decided to do a whole American area just so I can place down some of his American cars. That's not the real reason, but they do look stunning. They almost could pass as in-game assets. The use of the art pieces is literally that good. So here then, the building itself, it's actually based on an actual restaurant. I can't remember the name of it. I think it's Scooby's or Snoopy's or something like that. There'll be a picture on the screen of it right now, but I can't remember as I record the video, unfortunately. It's just seems to be just a regular restaurant, but I really wanted to have the sort of iconic Route 66 style gas station in there as well. So it becomes a gas and grill. That's probably not a thing, but it sounds American. Again, I'm not building an American area. I'm building a British idea of an American area. So any mistake I come up with regarding American sort of architecture or American life in general, then it's allowed, because that's what would have happened. We British aren't the best at sort of, although I would argue that Americans aren't very good at it either, but we British aren't the best at sort of accepting other people's cultures and things like that. So we would most likely have looked at a few pictures and then gone ahead and built it. Here, there's some fencing that sort of corners off what will become the next main backstage area. I wanted to keep it a little bit more open, though. Again, this isn't a Disney park. This isn't one of those parks where all the backstage buildings are painted green and you can't see anything. You have to do a special code and special handshake just to get to them. Here, the reason you're not going to look at the backstage areas is because they're boring. It's simple as that. And, you know, backstage areas are going to be visible from the rides. Backstage areas are going to be visible from certain areas of the path. The eye lines aren't going to be that as important as they would be in something like a Disney park. Here we're using some of these awesome signs. One of the main reasons I want to do this area is because there are some really great signs in the game, but they're huge and really stylized, so they kind of only really lend themselves to this style of build. You'll see there I wrote gas and grill until I realised that it probably should be a gas and grill. So yeah, we moved that across there. Bigsby's, it was the first word that came into my head. It sounded a little bit mobster, you know, American 60s, I don't know. So there you go. Unfortunately, we haven't got much more footage, so we're going to cut into a live section now so we can have a bit of a better look at it. Okay, so first of all, let's have a quick look at sort of how this area sits compared to the rest of the park. So you'll see it sits a little lower So we've got a bit of a height variation as it comes down towards the lake. Chances are this would have been one smooth slope that they've since sort of built the dock onto, which would make sense. So it's a little bit lower down. Originally I was just going to have the entrance here, but I've decided to have the thing come all the way around. One, to make it a little bit more usable as far as the game is concerned, but also it would make sense rather than just have this completely area a dead end here as well. There's a possibility of this path going all the way around the lake. Like I said, I feel the lake will actually get a little bit bigger, probably sort of come up here a little bit more as well. This area here is going to be our campsite eventually, so the park itself will sort of come as a big sea around the big backward sea around the lake. That's the idea there. So we've got at the moment the Sparrow Wharf sign. Like I say, this will probably go more like here, I think. Based around the structure that will become the bridge structure eventually. I've done a very loose start of it over here, but that will obviously carry on over and make more of a thing here. Not really sure what to do with this space. This may well just stay as greenery, or sort of low-lying greenery, because I quite like the line of the Ferris wheel and the coaster here, as if it couldn't have been better timing. Look at that, there you go. So I can't, rather than cover it all up with trees, I may well keep that as sort of low-lying greenery. And maybe sort of build it up more over this side where this area doesn't perhaps look as nice as the sort of back-to-back area here. Anyways, this comes down here. This will most likely be a dead end, and the only way across the lake here, rather than coming around the coaster, will be on the boats themselves. So this area here most likely will shut off. And then here we have Bigsy's Bar and Grill, Bigsy's Gas and Grill, excuse me. The signage here, I would love for this to rotate. That was the exact sort of thing that you would expect it to do. Fortunately, it doesn't. Maybe it could go a little higher. I'm still very sort of conscious of scale here, and although these things usually are pretty tall, so it'll probably go up a little. Let's have a look. Yeah, that seems a bit more acceptable. Okay. Here we have some picnic benches, although these aren't usable. These are placed down using the path trick and then getting rid of the path afterwards, so they're not going to come and use these. In fact, this building itself isn't usable. I did think about sticking a cafe in there, but to be honest with you, I got such a strong idea of what I wanted the architecture to look like. Trying to stick a shop in there just ruined it, to be honest with you, and just made it not look as great. There will obviously be shops down here, probably a larger restaurant, but this is just a set piece. So I've used the modern windows. Really happy with how these have turned out, actually. I think they look really great. And it's just such a nice change from using some very different parts over in the 40s area to try something a little bit different. Like I say, it's taken very much from at least this angle is here, taken very much from inspiration from an image I found on YouTube, but then here it sort of twists and it becomes a little bit more sort of traditional Dust Road 60s kind of, or maybe even earlier than that, 40s, with the all tyres, service and gas and spares and repairs, and some of the tyres put down. And then here, this area is actually going to be a backstage area that will make its way, pretty much will follow the line of the coaster and be just a backstage path that comes all around and joins on to the area of backstage here on the coaster itself, most likely with a row of shops. So this is basically going to be a promenade, a boardwalk. One row here of shops, a couple of rides. I would like to do a cinema, a sort of traditional Art Deco cinema here that will probably throw a flat ride inside so people go in and out of it, and also get some people over here as well, because at the moment, even with the Ferris wheel and the boats, nobody's coming into this area at the moment. So it's very important to get a really sort of high prestige ride in here that actually moves people into the area, because once they're here they'll decide to ride things nearby, but at the moment getting them over to here in the first place is actually pretty tough. So then we've got this area here. This will be relatively light here, probably even maybe just foliage, a little bit of a sort of forest walk here from around the back of the Thunderer. And then here, this pier will end up being a little bit, like I said in the time lapse, a little bit more traditionally British, sort of using iron railings and stone and a bit of wood as it goes further out like that. And up the end here, we'll probably just place a vista point so people will walk down to the end of the pier and take photos of the boats as they go past. Probably have a couple of little water features in the lake as we work on as well. So although it doesn't look like much, it's mostly excuse me, it's mostly planning out the larger area and what we're going to do. And we may even if a few people I've been chatting to fancy having a go at this Googie style architecture, we may even have a guest or two on to help out with this area. We'll soon find out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for bearing with me over the Christmas period. It's so great to be back properly in Planet Coaster, and it is so great to be back in Pinewood Hills. It got to the front of the Steam Workshop when I released Stage 1. Got really great comments and feedback on it. Thank you so much for all the support through 2017. I hope it continues through 2018 as well, and you can join me continuing to work on this park as we move forward. One thing I do want to mention very briefly, and please, I really don't want you to think of this as begging, but it's something I don't mention very often, so I thought I would. We do have a Patreon set up for Geekism. The reason I'm mentioning it now is because January's ad revenue and the preceding months really tails off. So YouTube isn't going to be giving me much money for the next few months at least. So if it's something you might be interested in, you can head over there. There's lots of cool little perks like getting your name in the game. What we're going to be doing is making all the parking spaces here reserved parking, and we're going to be placing patrons' names in there, but also getting your name at the end of the video, and also just sort of like backstage sort of little secret posts that I place up onto the Patreon page as well. If it's something you think you'd be able to do and help me out, you can go to patreon.com/geekism. And I continue thanking you all for your support, even if it's just watching videos. People often ask me, what can I do to help the channel? I can't give money, but what can I do to help the channel? Just watch the stuff I make. It literally is that simple. If you're only here for Planet Coaster, try something else. Try Islands, try My Time in Portia, try movies. All of the games I play have got a creative flair to them where I can try and sort of exercise my creative juices a little bit, so I'm sure there'll be something in them that you appreciate and enjoy. So if I can say nothing else, as we move into 2018, click the like button, share it on Twitter, and just watch the stuff. It really is that simple. Thank you so much again for your continued support, and I'll see you in the next one.